And then I have these other cards that I'm handing out. It's just a quick thing for my book. You can find out more about the book, but also in the back there's a QR code that will take you to information about the book, but also more than anything, it has a survey. Anyway. Okay. All right. I think I have the microphone on. Is there anyone that, I guess they can let me know if the microphone isn't working for the group? Are they good? All right, cool. Oh, thank you. No. I can do it. I'll just throw that slide up and do it there.
Okay, awesome. And please help yourself to pizza if you haven't already.
Okay. The mouse in the right spot. I'll try to walk around with the mouse here. So I'm not standing in the same spot necessarily. Just a little bit about me. So I got my Bachelor's of Science in Computer Science here at Boise State, and then I got my Executive MBA here as well. So familiar with both colleges of engineering and business. And I've spent most of my professional career at HP Inc., working originally in LaserJet and a variety of other roles that have taken me all over the world and been a lot of fun. But at one point I was doing, what's relevant here is one point I was doing the hiring for the Boise site. I was hiring more than 100 people every year off of my own recs. So did a lot of interviews, a lot of career fairs, and a lot of hiring, and saw a lot of what happened there. I'm also currently on the board of directors for the Boys and Girls Clubs of Ada County, which is a great cause, and the author of a book, Finding Your Fit. And just a quick note on that book. Essentially, it's when I first started trying to apply for different jobs within HP and move around, ran into a lot of challenges, learned a lot about that, learned a lot about how, what I need to do in order to advance. And then when I started doing the hiring, I saw the whole other side of it, and I started seeing why certain things worked and other things didn't. And because I was hiring so many people, I started mentoring a lot of people at HP that when they wanted to move around, they came to me for advice. Put all that together, had a lot of notes, decided to write a book, and eventually wrote the book. So that's where the book comes from. The QR code on the card that I handed out that has the book on the front. My only request is go in there. There's a survey. Fill out the survey. Tell me what you think of the content of this presentation. Let me know what was good, what you liked, what was maybe missing. Any thoughts? I'm just looking for feedback to try to improve it for next time I share. Okay. What I'm going to talk about today is when to do what and how, making the most of a career fair, and some tips on acing the interview. And that's going to kind of just be the snippets I take out of it. And then I'm going to try to leave some time for Q&A. And let's see. Can someone give me a cue when we're getting like last 10 minutes? Okay, great. And you may have to like wave your arms wildly in case I don't pay attention, but make sure I'm on track, because I do want to leave some time for questions. The questions can be over the content of what I'm sharing, could be anything else. I'll do my best just to try to help answer. All right. Hard to see because of Zoom. Zoom ruins your presentation sometimes. But basically this slide is what to do when and how. And just to kind of illustrate, I mean, this is for me, the foundation before you can figure out anything else. Going back to an experience I had in middle school in a different time and place, I was I think like in 4th or 5th grade, and there was this girl that I had a crush on, and we'd go back whenever it was recess or in between classes, and there's that area at the back of the classroom behind the wall where there's your bag and your coats and everything. And so every time we'd walk through there, we kind of flirt with each other. And one time as the holidays were approaching, I went back there. We were getting ready for recess or something, and she was waiting there for me, stopped me, and pointed up. And her friend was holding mistletoe over my head. And at that point, she leaned forward and puckered up her lips. And my immediate reaction, my natural reaction, was to shake my head violently, and turn away. And after I started to come into my senses, I realized that wasn't the best response for that situation. I finally worked up the courage, and I turned around. I had my eyes closed. I turned around and leaned in to firmly kiss the back of her head, because she had turned around at that point and given up. And that was the end of that relationship. So what's the point of this story? The first thing is that the response that I had, the process that I had of turning and shaking my head, in many situations, that would have been the right thing to do. But it wasn't in that situation. And additionally, the process of turning with my eyes closed and blindly kissing whatever was there was probably not a good process either, right? So it wasn't the right way to do it. And oddly enough, one of the things that I observed in all of the interviewing and career fairs that I've done is people doing exactly that. Taking a process that they thought was a good process, really bad for a situation, and making things worse out of it. So I see that a lot. So let's go into an example when it comes to hiring. Recently, I had two openings for intern positions that I was hiring for, and I had more than 100 people online apply. And when that happened, if you think about that, the question then becomes, if you're one of those 100 people, how do you get to be one of the ones that's interviewed? And then how do you get to be one of the ones that's hired, right? 2 people out of 100. How do you get there? And I think that's part of what I'm hoping to convey a little bit to you, is how do you get there and how that works. And the first thing you have to understand is every hiring manager goes through 2 different steps or 2 processes that they use to take you from 100 to 2. And you should really understand what those 2 processes are. And even if the hiring manager doesn't know it, they're using those 2 processes. The first process I call Survivor Island. Who's getting voted off the island? What have you done to get eliminated? Now, in a perfect world, it's simply going through and eliminating people who have the wrong degree type, they have the wrong background experience, maybe they don't have proper work credentials for citizenship or whatever it is. And so those are the easy ones. But there are a lot of other things you can do that will get you eliminated. And sometimes managers look at those things to try to help make it easier on them and spend less time on people that they're not going to end up hiring. And then on the other side of that, at the same time, there's a playoff going on. And some people do things that are interesting to the hiring manager. Even if it's just one thing, they ignore the rest of the package. That looks interesting. I might be interested in that. Let's move them forward and at least go to the next level, maybe a deeper screening or whatever it is. But they're advancing through the process because of something positive. And every hiring manager is going to use one of those 2 things. How much they use of each one really can depend on how easy you make it for them to eliminate you, how easy you make it for them to see something that's interesting, and whether or not a manager is good at telling the difference between the 2. Because I have seen a lot of managers overuse the first one. The faster they can narrow it down, they think the easier, but sometimes you then eliminate the best candidates for very trivial reasons. So you got to be careful to do that, to pay attention to what's happening there. So in the example of the interns, I started off with 100 candidates plus, and I went through screening all of their resumes, just quickly going through resumes, trying to find out who's not even, you know, qualified, and who might I want to continue with the process. And as I went through that, it's mostly Survivor Island, eliminating those who aren't qualified. That still got me down to 30. And so it wasn't enough. So I needed to do a little bit more Survivor Island. So I'm going to go deeper into that elimination process. And in this case, I shared the resumes with some colleagues to see, hey, do you see any flags here? Anything you dislike or like maybe? And we go through a little bit. Some of it's playoff. It's mostly Survivor Island because I'm trying to whittle it down. And that got me down to 20. And then out of that 20, I did some phone screens where it was a very short phone screen. And I wasn't looking at their qualifications because we already kind of got at least an idea. I was looking at personality-wise, how would they fit on my team, right? So another way to say, if the personality doesn't fit, qualifications don't matter. So now I can eliminate some more people. So more Survivor Island, that goes from 20 then down to 10. And then from the 10, we did interviews. Now we're looking mostly for playoffs. Sometimes you'll still see a couple of red flags during interviews that eliminate. So it went from 10 to 8 just from the red flags. And then those final 8, we used the playoff to try to see who's going to add the most value, who showed something interesting that we would like to see more of. And then that narrowed it down to the 2 that were selected, right? So these 2 processes are interweaving throughout the whole process that's happening. You're either getting eliminated because something really turned the manager off, or you're getting promoted because they identified with something. And that's how you get through that. So being aware of that, you need to pay attention that you're not doing those big mistakes that will easily get you eliminated. And you're spending a little effort to highlight something that might get you moving forward. Seems kind of trivial, but it really makes a difference in terms of understanding what we're going to do from here on out. So with that in mind, how are you one of the ones that avoids getting eliminated and advances yourself to with the playoff? And in fact, this is, when I was mentoring, this was the #1 question that I got. What's that one secret tip that I can use? Something I could put on the resume. It's this secret code that if the hiring manager sees the code, I got to hire that one, right? That's the secret code right there. They have it. They know they're in the in group, right? Or whatever. And they want to know what's the golden ticket to help them get the job. And in some respects, if you're here, you're interested in learning, what can I use to help me go get that job, right? How many here would like to know what that golden ticket is? You ready? Okay, here we go. There isn't one. There's no golden ticket, unfortunately. However, there is a way of looking at it that will help guide you to always do the golden ticket for your situation. And so I'm going to talk about that a little bit. What I have here is just your generic map of what happens. You're in a situation, something happens, whether it was intentional or not, and then there's an outcome. And I call this a sit-out map. It's from situation to outcome. You're in a situation and it flows through to some outcome. And basically, this is what happens when you go online and you see LinkedIn and they've got this easy apply, and you apply for 350 postings without even looking at, the name of the company, right? Just blastogram in it. You're in a situation, you applied for a whole bunch of things, you hope there's a good outcome, and you're disconnected from it. Now, most of you are here because you're trying to inject a little improvement in that map. And you do that with what's hidden behind that wall. There's any chance we could hide this or minimize it? Would it be possible? Can I do it from here? All right, I'm going to minimize that if that's okay. See if I can get it up out of the way. All right, that'll help. Whoops, I'm going through the slides as I do it. We'll go, where is it? Previous? Right there. Good enough. All right, so basically you're here because you want to add a process that will help improve your influence on that outcome. And in fact, that's what everyone's looking for when they ask what that golden ticket is. What is that secret tip? What is that one process that will help my resume get through the screening, that will help my in the interview or whatever? What is that one tip, right? The problem with this, now it's true, you now have some influence because you're doing something about it. However, this doesn't always work because the situation can be very different. Now, for those of you in the business group here, one of the things we always talked a lot about when I was in my MBA program was, what's the right thing to do? What's the right method to use? It depends. And that's the way everything is with all of these processes you use. There is no right one. It depends. Some are good, but it doesn't mean that they're good for that. And so if you're not careful, if you use a good process in the wrong situation, it'll actually be worse than if you didn't do anything at all. And the example I'll give is this university that I call Books and Dice University. Now, I was at a career fair. It wasn't at Boise State, somewhere else. And I was visiting another location, and we had an HP booth, and there were some other HP managers there that were local to that area. They were hiring. Each of them had their own specific roles they were hiring for. And at the same time I was there, I was hiring for like 50 internships and 50 full-time hires. So I wasn't looking for a job. I was looking for candidates. It was a very different situation. Now, these students, in particular, I'm going to focus on the intern students that were there. These intern students, when I would talk with them, they came up to me, and the first one, when they came up to me, the first thing they said was, describe for me the type of project you have and what I will be doing on that project. Not a terrible question. Did I have a project for them? No, I had 50, and I didn't even know what all the projects were because I wasn't that familiar with every one of them, right? I wasn't there to represent a project. So the issue was that question didn't work for my situation. So I spent 10 minutes answering the question, explaining, look, I have multiple projects. I'm hiring for a whole bunch of different positions from different, different organizations, you know, a variety of things. I can tell you in general, this is what we're looking for. And I'd spend 10 minutes trying to answer why I couldn't answer the question. And then the time was up, and I move on to the next person, the very next person in line. This is person number 2. Describe for me what kind of project you have and what I would be doing to work on it. I'm like, I just spent 10 minutes telling the guy right in front of you, and they had no idea because they weren't listening. They didn't care. They were just asking the question because maybe someone told them to. And in fact, every single intern candidate that I spoke with that day started with that same question. And every one of them, I'd have to explain and go through that. And at the end of the day, I spent all of my time answering a question of why I couldn't answer the question. And I didn't get to know any of them. And I didn't hire any of them. Now, was the question a terrible question? No, it's not a bad question. It wasn't a good question for me. And just getting that question on its own and looking at the process on its own, you can't judge whether it's a good one or a bad one. And if you just use a process blindly, then it's just a gamble. You're rolling the dice. Is it going to work or isn't it? And so bad university there is what it was for me. Okay. So we need to think about how can we improve this? And what I've kind of just laid out, it seems trivial, but I just kind of broke down what is needed to make the processes applicable to you. And I took that sit-out map, I enhanced it, I called it enhanced sit-out map, or just an ESO map for short. And in this ESO map, what I've done is I've added 2 things. I've added purpose and principle. What is your purpose for that question? I'm getting bumped here. I don't know how to undo that without going forward. All right. What is your purpose for that question? Why are you asking it? What are you trying to do with that question? You should understand that. They were asking that question. And by the way, the other off-putting thing about it was very ungenuine. It was not genuine at all. They were just, someone said, here, do this. And they just did it like robots. And it wasn't them. So I didn't get to know them. And none of them understood the purpose or why they were doing it. And then there's a principle that you can use to help guide you. How do I achieve that purpose? So for example, you want some cookies that were made in the other room. One of the principles you've heard growing up is flattery will get you everywhere. That's a principle. It's not a specific task or process. It's a principle of truth. So what do? You find a way to flatter that person so that they'll give you cookies. With that, your purpose is to get a cookie, right? That's what you want. That's your outcome that you want. You use the principle, flattery will get you everywhere, and it helps determine for you how to treat and how to behave in that situation to help you get cookies. You can't go with just one of those alone. If you don't understand all three, you're going to make all kinds of terrible mistakes in your job seeking process. So even though it seems kind of trivial, forcing yourself to step through what's my purpose, what's the principle, what's the process can really make a big difference. In my book, I talk about 12 particularly powerful principles that are important for job seeking. And we already mentioned one of them a little bit, understand the hiring process. What are those methods for screening? That's about understanding the hiring process. As we go into talking about career fairs and what to do in career fairs, we'll talk about a few more: discover their need, ask questions with a purpose, and connecting trumps all. But in each of these things, I have a principle that I'm applying that I've learned is effective in different situations. And then based on what our purpose is, we can use that to help us understand what's the right process. So career fairs, first question, are they important? Do you think you should go to career fairs? Is it something that you need to do? I mean, it's an online world. You don't have to meet people in person. If nothing else, it gives you increased access and it's an opportunity to connect and stand out. Now, for me, when I was hiring, especially when I was hiring that many, you'd think, well, there's no way I'm going to meet that many people in person. I just went to more career fairs. And I did everything strategically by starting with career fairs because it allowed me to truly screen people at a very efficient rate in person. And then from there, we can go deeper on how qualified they are and do the interviews and whatever else. So I went exclusively through career fairs when I could. Now that 100 candidates that I had for internships, I didn't have a chance to go to career fair because the timing was wrong. So you still want to apply online. You want to maximize your opportunities, but definitely you got to go to career fairs. In the career fair, what I'm going to talk about is discovering their need and asking questions with the purpose. So when we talk about bad university and the questions they asked me, first of all, none of them knew why they were asking that question. Some counselor or someone in their university said, here's a good tip, do this, and they just all did it. None of them understood why. Second of all, they didn't learn what I needed. They were trying to find out what they needed. And I can't tell you how often I see people in the job hunting space trying to promote, to let everyone know who they are and trying to find out what they needed when they'd ask questions. You know, when is the interview wrap up? When, how much is the pay? What are the hours, right? I mean, you're always asking questions about what you need. You should be asking questions about what I need because you're going to learn those things that help you define the situation better. I'll give an example. Farmer George, maybe some of you have heard this story. Farmer George had a sick cow. And he didn't speak with his neighbor very often, but one day he was out, he sees his neighbor on the edge of the property, he goes to his neighbor, he says, Henry, I heard you had a sick cow last month. What'd you do with your sick cow? What'd you give your sick cow? Henry says, turpentine. George says, thank you. And he goes back on his way. A few weeks later, George sees Henry and he goes over to Henry. He says, Henry, I thought you said you gave your cow turpentine. I did. Well, I gave my cow turpentine and he died. Mine did too. Right? So George wasn't seeking necessarily to learn, or he hadn't identified what his real purpose was. and it backfired on him. Oh, I'm getting the wrong way again. So these good questions have a purpose. Now, let's look at what George could have done differently. Had he thought about what his real purpose was, his purpose wasn't just to ask a question. His purpose was to find out, does Henry know something that might help him with his sick cow? And if he had thought through what that purpose was, when he asked the question with the purpose, and Henry just said turpentine with no other info, he would have realized that didn't give me my purpose. I'm not done asking. I need to alter my question a little. Did it work? What happened when you gave your cow turpentine? Thinking through your purpose, adding that into asking the question, and Henry could have saved his cow, or at least not killed it with turpentine. Right? And that's what you need to be thinking about when you ask questions in all of these scenarios. At the career fair, you're going to get a couple questions. They better be good. Now, when you apply a purpose to a question and make that question more meaningful, if you can then get better at coming up with questions because you add either a more impactful purpose or something that can give you the answer to more than one purpose, then you have what I call power questions, where they can solve more than one purpose. And my favorite power question is, what are the biggest challenges of this position? And I love this question because it solves like 8 or 9 different possible purposes that I've listed. But it also, one of the purposes it solves is the most difficult one. When you are talking to a hiring manager, if you were to ask the hiring manager, hey, what are you looking for? What are they going to tell you? Are they going to tell you, you know, I'd really like to see somebody that can do this. If I see that, I'm hiring them. They're not going to tell you that. Because if they told everyone that, everyone would say, yeah, I have that. That's me. And now the hiring manager has no idea who to hire. So they hold back a little bit, even if they don't realize it, hoping to see what they're wanting to stand out in someone. And they'll never tell you that. But if you ask them, what's the biggest challenge of this position? Guess what? Indirectly, they're going to tell you what they're looking for, because they want somebody capable of dealing with that challenge. And even though they may not list what the attributes are, you can see, well, that challenge is going to need some conflict resolution. It's going to need whatever. And you're going to understand fundamentally what the manager is looking for, right? So thinking this through can really change how powerful the questions are that you ask. All right. Now, the other principle I want to talk about is called, I call connecting trumps all. And the example that I have is when the very first time I was invited to be on an interview panel to interview some candidates for a position, it was a technical expert position. And I went through all the candidates. And as I went through them, I'm looking for a technical expert. And to me, when I completed all my interviews, it was very clear to me who was the best technical expert out of that group. And that was my number one candidate. So then we get into our interview wrap-up meeting, and we start off, oh, who's your number one? I gave them, oh, yeah, my number one is so-and-so. And then they ask the next person, what's your number one and number two, right? And they're like, oh, my number one is someone else. And then my guy was number two. And then the next person, their number one was someone else. And my guy was number two. And it went all the way around the room. And literally every other interviewer named a different person. It was the same different person, but they named a different person than mine. And I was blown away because the person that they named had no technical background. And I'm like, look, the guy was nice. And he was, you know, a great person. But isn't this a technical expert position? And like, oh, yeah, it is. Well, then why are you guys picking the other guy? The answers they gave were, well, you know, he was relatable, or he had good leadership skills, or it was a gut feel. And sometimes you hear managers say it was a gut feel, and they have no idea what that means. They just know for some reason they like that guy. And what I've found is that gut feel is a connection that person made. And it was so powerful that even though the candidate had no qualifications for the job, he was selected. It was more powerful than the skills. So how much of your time when you're talking with people are you spending telling them what your skills are versus how much are you spending building a connection? It makes a huge difference. So career fair, simple things. First of all, Survivor Island, avoiding those things which will break the connection, right? This isn't skills related. This is the connection part. Hygiene, right? Now, obviously, best case scenario, you're dressed up, you're showered, clean cut hair, all the good stuff, right? I get that sometimes you show up and go, oh crap, I forgot. Today was the career fair. I was up all night programming or doing whatever, writing that business case, doing that case study or whatever it was. And you realize I didn't shower. I'm wearing my scrubs. I'm not ready for the career fair. You still got to go. So in the very least, wash your hands thoroughly. Take a breath mint. Stop at one of the kiosks or the stores in the area. Get a breath mint, right? Those basic things. I can't tell you how many times I'm shaking 100 hands in a couple of hours. And when they're wet and sticky, that's no good. I'm not thinking, I want to, who are you and tell me about you? I'm thinking, crud, I got to go wash my hand, right? There's no connection happening. So think about that. Now, your resume, be clear on what your goal is and think about what my needs are. When you hand me your resume, when I leave that career fair and I go back to work 3 days later or whenever it is and go through that stack of resumes, and I've got 150 resumes, I don't remember who is who. I don't remember anything about that. And so a lot of them I'll look at and I'm like, gee, was this person an intern candidate or were they a full-time? I got to treat them separately. They got different interview paths and everything, different screening paths. And if I can't tell, it goes in neither one. So be very clear what you're looking for. And you can't say both. You're only qualified for one. In fact, HP, we're not even allowed to hire you as an intern, if it's within a certain period of when you graduate. So you're only qualified for one. You're either looking for one or the other. Put it on there. And then list when you graduate. Right? When I see, well, I'm a senior, or I'm a junior, or I'm a sophomore. Well, I don't know what that means. You graduate in December? Are you going in the 8-year plan? I have no idea. Give me your target date of when you're going to graduate. So then I can have clarity when I'm looking and saying, I was really impressed with this person and they were only a sophomore, right? Or they've got 2 years left. I might want to bring them in now so I can have them for a couple of years, right? Sometimes I'm looking for someone who would be an intern for 2 years, but I need to know that. Give me that date. And then consider the digital scanning aspects of it. What's going on digitally with the hiring manager? From a career fair, I've got all these analog paper files, right? And I got to do something with them. And I would normally go and I'll scan them all in. And if they have a funky font or weird graphics, that stuff gets lost when I'm scanning, and I'll scan it in, make some photocopies or whatever. That stuff gets lost. You want to have something that's a standard font. What's gonna handle what's happening with the digital age? Maybe I'm taking snapshots with my phone. I don't know. Staples. Don't use staples. First of all, if you're in college, you probably shouldn't have 2 pages, but definitely don't use staples. Because I'm going through the stack, and if 8 of them have staples, I don't want to pull it out and get a staple remover and pull. I'm trying to scan 200 documents. I want to just throw them in the thing and have it rip through them, right? So throw in a paper clip or something so I can remove it and scan it. Anyway, those are things that seem little, but when you got a whole bunch of things to go through, you're looking for a reason to have one less to look at, and you're giving them one. Okay. On the other side of things, what can you do that's positive that will help you stand out? And the first thing I'll say is leave open space on the top of your resume, whether it's around your name and right below your name, leave room for them to put some notes. If I do like a candidate and I have nowhere to write what I like about them, I'll forget what I liked about them. And then when I'm trying to compare them with others, I'll be like, oh, I liked him, but I don't remember why. I like that one. I know why. And it gives them advantage. If you do the work to put on a good impression, make sure you have room for the manager to write that down. Okay. Besides the fact that it's just a nice first glance, something clean. Learn needs and then demonstrate fit. Don't try to demonstrate fit and hope it's what they need. We talked about that a little bit, right? Learn what the other person needs first, then see, how you can describe how you can do what they need. Seek friendship. Now, this one's a little bit tricky. when I was in, computer science, coming out of engineering, that was like, oh, hold on now. I'm not a social person here. I'm not there to just make friends, right? I'm there to show what my technical skills are. But what I mean by seek friendship is you're working to build a connection. How would you talk with someone in a setting where you're just trying to get to know them? Whether it's someone you're meeting at a party or at church or wherever, right? You're going to ask them what their name is. You're going to ask what they like doing. You're going to try to get to know them a little bit so that you can build a connection with them. So seek that a little bit. It doesn't have to be best friends. You don't have to be an extrovert. You just have to have some intentional thought about how can I get to know this person? And then the last thing is, I get asked all the time, should I put a picture on my resume or hand out a business card with my picture on it? And I'll say, when you go online and you do something online, no picture. It just takes up, it gets in the way. It doesn't always work right. Sometimes it shifts things funky. And it just makes it take longer for me to screen people. And screening people online, by the way, tedious, pain in the rear. Pieces of paper, it's not as bad. It's easier to leaf through. But the biggest thing is on pieces of paper, when I go to career fair, I'm seeing their faces. I'm remembering who I liked, but I'm not necessarily able to write that down so easily or remember which one's which. You put a picture on a resume at a career fair, great idea. Because now if you do the work to make a good impression, they'll remember you. And they'll be able to pull that out of that stack of 150 and remember that picture. Yeah, like that guy. Okay? So, tips on career fair. Hopefully I'm doing okay on time here. Am I over time? Oh, that's right. It was a half hour. Okay, good. All right, interview. Let's talk a little bit about interviews. First thing I want to talk about with interviews is avoiding noise that detracts from fit. It's kind of Survivor Island based, although it can impact your playoff as well. But you want to not do things that turn them off, right? Number one, don't sell yourself. Everyone will tell you, this is your chance to sell yourself. This is your chance to make them like you. Let them know what you can do. And Randy respects that's true. But that's the outcome you want. That's not the process you want. You got to understand the difference. Remember when that map, the difference between the outcome at the top and the process that you're going to use to get to that. The principle, and then below that, the purpose that helps you to the process. And selling yourself is not a good process. Because sometimes when I talk with people in interviews or at career fairs, even, they look like this, right? Look like the car salesman. Can't stop talking. A little bit deceitful, a little bit desperate. None of these things are good qualities in the hiring process. Your job there is not to sell you. Real world example, person I'll call Noisy Nancy. She worked at HP and had applied for a position in a different group, asked for my help. And as it turned out, there were a couple of gaps that she had in the job requirements. She had some strengths, some of the stuff in the job requirements she had, some she didn't. She was worried about those gaps. So she took her resume, she modified her resume to throw in some words that mentioned those areas that she had no experience in. Now, when I talked with, as it turned out, I knew the hiring manager. So I reached out to the hiring manager because she'd asked for my help and wanted to talk with the hiring manager, let him know a little bit about her. He says, oh, well, we weren't going to interview her. Her resume has all this stuff in there that clearly doesn't match her background, just doesn't seem to fit in. I have no idea who this person is. So we weren't going to interview her. I proceeded, he's like, tell me I'm wrong. I'm confused. I have no idea who they are. So I told them a little bit about who she was, what she was good at, what her strengths were, what her abilities were, what she would fit into. And as it turned out, they had a gap on their team that could really use some skills she had. He was very interested in that. So I said, you know what? I'll give her a chance. I'll interview her. After talking with him, I reached back out to her. I said, look, when you interview, make sure you don't hang on to that stuff you don't know anything about. You move on, say, I don't know much. I just know what I've heard about it. That's it. and you need to sell your strengths. Spend your time on what you do. Well, what'd she do in the interview? They asked her, well, what's this about this you have in here? I don't know. I have no idea. And then she tried to talk her way out of it, right? And she spent all her time in the interview trying to explain what she knew that she didn't know she knew, right? And basically all of this was a distraction because they had no idea what she could do and never gave her an opportunity to show where she would fit. And she didn't get the job. Okay. So, and that also kind of brings up, look, your goal here isn't to con your way into a position. The most effective thing you can do is to create transparency, showing them how you could do what they need, which means it starts with learn. When you're in the interview, your job isn't to sell yourself. Your job is to learn. What is this job need? What does that hiring manager need? What are they looking for? By the way, if you get a little stressed, because having to sell yourself can cause a lot of anxiety. It can be stressful. Gee, I hope they like me, right? And that can make you screw up on answers and everything, and your brain's not there. If you're separating the outcome from your process and saying, that's not my goal, I don't care about the outcome, I want to learn what they need. And then once I know what they need, when they ask me a question, I know what they're looking for in the question. I can now answer it and just focus the answer on just the part they need and not everything else they don't need. Because if you spend all that time on the stuff they don't need, one other story I'll get to. I'll do it in the next slide, right? So your focus there is to learn. All right. What does that look like in this enhanced sit out map or the ESO map, right? You're in a situation, you're in an interview. Your goal is to build a better connection to the interviewer. And what you can't see at the top there is the principle. Someone once told me, the more they talked, the better it went. I don't remember if it was even about interviews, but it nails interviews. If you talk the entire time, you did not do well. If you told them everything about you, all this glorious stuff, that project was on time, straight A student, whatever. If you talk the whole time, you did not do well. The more they talked, the better it went. First of all, when they're talking, you're learning. And the more you learn, the more your answers can show up to what they're looking for. When I hear people tell me stuff that I'm looking for, that does well in an interview. When I hear people tell me stuff that I will never use, doesn't help me. It's not appealing. It detracts from the fit. Right? So you want them talking more. And you're doing that by trying to understand what's happening. Furthermore, when they talk more, that's where that gut feeling comes from. That's where the connection comes from in an interview. And a lot of hiring managers don't even notice it happening. When they're talking, they now feel a part of the conversation. When they're sharing what they like, when they're sharing their hobbies, when they're sharing where they're from and where they grew up, they're now engaged in building a friendship with you. They like you more. And that connection is going to help them say, you know what? Boy, some rough spots on this gap, but I think this is the type of person we can develop up. Right? And that all came from getting them to talk more. Now, you'll notice in this flow here, the principle, the more they talk, the better they went. One way to do that is to seek to understand, not to be understood. There are other ways. And in your situation that you're in, you might have to use a different way. But think about, okay, what am I doing to get them to talk more? And one way, for example, another way is when they ask you a question, don't talk for 15 minutes. Answer the question, maybe even prod a little bit so you make sure you're answering what they want you to answer. And then let them ask the next question. Last story I'm going to tell, there's a guy I call Blabber Bob. And Blabber Bob was prepared. He had clearly done his homework. He knew everything about the job. He knew everything about the company. And he wanted badly that job. And he came ready. He was prepared. I asked him a question, and 15 minutes later, I had to stop him to ask the next question. An hour later, I'd asked like 3 questions. How much out of those 3 questions, that 20 plus minutes per answer or whatever, do you think included stuff that I was actually looking for? If it was, I never heard it because about 3 minutes into each answer, I'm starting to think about, well, let's see, how do I want to reply to that email I was just looking at before this? My mind was drifting. I wasn't even there. Connection was lost. And I wasn't hearing anything that was helpful anyway. And he wasn't learning anything. So talk a little bit less. Okay. You don't have to sell everything. When you're in sell mode, it's bad. All right. When you do that, then you have a better chance of a good outcome. Can't control the outcome, but it's better. So in summary, when to do what and how, understand your purpose, adapt your situation using principles that they don't have to be just mine, right? Principles like flattery will get you everywhere. You can think, what principle applies here, right? If you look at the ones in my book, they really help you because they're really tailored for job hunting. But let's see. And then focus on the process, not the outcome. Make the most of career fairs. You're seeking to learn. You're asking good questions, and you're trying to make a connection. And then acing the job interview is the same thing. The more they talk, the better they went. They're both hand in hand. Same thing when you're the vice versa for each other. Same tips apply. And then that will help with your ultimate goal of getting hired. At least it'll improve your chances. So I talked about just a few parts of these principles for finding your fit. In my book, I go into a lot of detail about what they are and what's behind them and more examples around them. I also kind of talk about now that we have all these principles, how does that look? What do you do from the beginning to the end, from everything from preparation all the way through to what do you do after the interviews? That's all kind of in there. Again, the QR code that's on those cards, if you don't have a card, make sure you get one. That's got an opportunity for feedback as well as going in and ordering the book. And with that, any questions? Okay. Yes, that's a good question. I actually go into that in my book. It was really interesting. In one organization I was in, there were two different managers. They were peers, and they were on the same team. And one of them said, if I ever get a 2-page resume, I throw it away. I don't even look at the name. And the other one said, if I ever get just a 1-page summary, it's not enough information. I never look at it. I throw it away, and I don't even look at the name. So there's no one size fits all on the 2-page thing. I will say two aspects of that. First one, be true to yourself. If putting in your stuff in 2 pages is what you feel comfortable with, the detail you're putting into it, then it's more likely that the manager that likes that will be the one that reaches out to you, which is good for you, versus the one who doesn't. You don't want to please a manager who doesn't fit you, because then you're going to be really miserable when you're working for them. The second part of that is you should only put 2 pages if there's really relevant content. So if you transitioning, 2 pages is fine. The only caveat to that is you absolutely must, in your first page, have very clear summary in the top half of that first page so that they can look at the top half and say, yeah, I'd like to keep looking. Because if they get through the top half and it's hard to read through and they're like, this is 2 pages, forget it. So you really got to summarize some of that experience in that first half of the first page. And then the second page is details that they could data mine. Good question. Other questions? Yeah. Very loaded question, but it's a good question. First of all, it's absolutely true in most cases. Again, depends on the person, the hiring manager, and whether it's the recruiter that's narrowing it down, by the way. And the recruiter adds a whole element. I have to tell the recruiters to back off, let me look at them, because they eliminate people I like all the time. They use too much Survivor Island. They think their job is to whittle it down. They don't know how to tell if someone's qualified, so they eliminate. They don't use playoff at all most of the time. So going back to that, then in most cases, if when I had 100 applicants online, I don't want to read every line of every resume, and a lot of them, were multiple pages, but they were interns, so not all of them. Thankfully, most of them weren't. Some of them weren't. But I want to glance at it and know, do I want to keep glancing? I don't have that much time. It's not even my job, right? When I was the hiring manager, that was my job. I focused on it. I studied it. I did all that stuff. The rest of the time, I just have a rec that's open. I got to hurry and fill it. I'm still doing my job. This is a nuisance. I want to spend as little time as possible on it. I do want to get a good person, but man, I'm busy. And so I'm going to glance at it and usually make a decision whether I want to keep glancing. Now, the few things I'll look for is I'll do a quick glance to say, yeah, you know what, their degree is in completely the wrong field, throw it away, right? So when I'm looking for my quick glance, it's, are they completely disqualified? Not capable of the job, and hoping that I'll find those ones and get those ones quickly. The other thing I'm looking for is, are they really good at showing what kind of personality they have? And part of what reveals your personality is how you describe what your experience is, right? If you say, I was doing this project at school and I was working in this language and that language, or I was, filling out this and I solved that problem and this problem, and you're just going straight through the details, I have no idea who you are. I don't know how well you did it either. But if you talk about what you accomplished, had a huge conflict, overcame the conflict with this is how I, managed that conflict or whatever, and you kind of show what you did in it, then I can see who you are, and that will pop out. Yeah. Your question. Yeah. First of all, on the single position thing, it really depends on where you're at in your career, right? When you're a new graduate, I mean, you can put a couple of details. Oh yeah, I'm really good in that language, so I'll put that in there. But for the most part, when I'm hiring, I don't even care what languages they're good in. When it's programming, I care, are they good at the fundamentals? And then they'll learn languages because we change them all the time anyway, right? In business, same thing. Yeah, sure, they're really familiar with this specialized area, really good with analytics or whatever, but do they understand this, the fundamentals? And so when you're a new graduate or especially an intern, I wouldn't even spend very much time altering your resume. Career fairs, though, as I mentioned, it's a different animal, right? I wouldn't put my picture when I'm applying online, but in a career fair, I would. And so you're catering to the situation for your career fair. So when you talk about then what you want to highlight for your career fair, it needs to be, what are those things that will stand out when it's printed, picture, open space, stuff like that. And maybe you don't need that as much online. And then the other part of it that you're really looking for at the career fair is, do they understand what your core capabilities are and not your specific capabilities? So that's where, you don't spend too much time talking about what technical skills you have in terms of specific coding languages or specific specialties in business. You just show where your interest is and where, what your fundamental background is. When I was hiring for 50 people at 50 interns at a career fair, I was looking for who's capable as an intern. And then I'll fit them to the job that they need. And you're going to find that at the tables at career fairs, it's a mixed bag. Some of them are going to be those ones. Yeah, I have the one position. Great. Some of them are going to be like me. I'm trying to fill a whole bunch. And we got a variety of them. I need someone that is a good quality candidate, and then we'll fit them to the best position. So your career fair one's got to be a little more generic, but show who you are. I remember you. Yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on people directly messaging hiring managers on LinkedIn asking for positions or stuff like that?
Yeah. So I will say, really good question. The first advantage that I had when I was applying for positions internally at HP is every position I was applying for, I knew the hiring manager because it listed it on the position. When you're internal, it shows the hiring manager's name. And so I could reach out to him and say, hey, you've got this opening. I just want to learn a little bit about your opening, and go spend 15, 20 minutes chatting with them to learn a little bit about the opening. And then A, they got to know me. B, I'd learn, no, this isn't really my fit. Or I'd learn, oh yeah, I could do this, I could do that. And it prepares me then for the interviews if they do interview me. So any opportunity you have to connect, career fair, LinkedIn, reach out and say, hey, can I just spend 10 minutes on Zoom with you and find out what are you looking for in this position? Or here's who I am. I want to let you know if you're looking for anything in this area, I'd love to tell you more about me or whatever. But any opportunity to connect. Yep. And honestly, hiring managers don't go, oh crap, I'm getting harassed again. Right? They say, hey, there's another possibility. When I need it, I know where to go. So good question. Other questions? Yeah, I mean, when you're in college, it's tough, right? Because normally we try to go by time. And I know when I was in college, time made it a long list. Even if it was a relatively short amount of time, potentially, right? 5 years is a lot of jobs when you're out of high school and college. And so normally I would say it's time-based. But in college, right, you can be a little sensitive. If you're doing a resume, ideally it's going to fit on one page, unless you're one of those transition people and you have real work experience that can be relatable to, in that. And the other caveat to that transition thing is, if you're showing previous experience, show what you got out of that previous experience that might apply, whether it's leadership skills, responsibility, highlight what's going to apply to the other job. Right. And so if your previous experience doesn't help you, show who you are and what you could do for the job, don't put too much. Just put enough to show, hey, I've been working. Yep. Explain why when you do. I will say, when we talk about Survivor Island and red flags in reviewing resumes, one of the number one red flags is, boy, they, especially when they're experienced, right? This is after college. Boy, they've had 8 jobs in 9 years, right? Oh, what's going on? Or, wow, there's a 2-year gap here. What happened there? Were they unemployed the whole time? Were they just not searching? Were they not marketable? Why weren't they working for 2 years? So you got to at least explain why you left that off. You could just put it and say the name of the place, and then don't list anything, any bullets underneath it, because it's not really relevant. Maybe put one bullet and say, information available upon request, right? You don't have to put too much detail, but make sure there's an explanation of the whole time frame. Yep. That's okay. That's a good question. That's a hard one to do. It really is. I will say there was one person that stands out to me. And so the question for those online is, if you are speaking English as a second language and your English is not significantly fluent, how do you overcome that, right? And the one that stands out to me is, I had a candidate I met that was from some really isolated country, and the English was okay, but it wasn't great. And what he did, though, was he overcame that potential negative by adding a couple positives. And when you have 1 or 2 good positives, we ignore the rest of everything else, or at least we only give it casual thought unless there's something significant there. And in his case, right, he was very professional, very friendly. He emailed me that day. It was from a career fair, and he emailed me that day. And then, you know, everything he did was professional, really motivated. You could tell he was motivated. He was doing stuff, doing side projects. And so he had things to sell. And he was so impressive that we ended up hiring him, even though he was international, and interns we can hire international, but full-time we can't. And so, you know, we try not to do too much because we want to hire the interns we bring in. And, but we brought him in anyway. And then we hired him again the next year because he was younger. He still impressed us, and we got him an internship at a younger age. And then we even helped him. I was helping him get a job at Google, right? Because I was now invested. He impressed me so much. He connected with me. He was friendly with me. And he gave me that I like this guy. I want him to succeed. Now I'm his advocate. I was helping him overcome those challenges. So focus more on what is the positive that you bring. And when someone sees that, they'll overlook the other and help ramp you in with the other stuff. Yeah. Okay, great. All right. All right. And I'll happily sign them too. It'll add a good 30 cents to the value of the book. Oh, you want me to pick? Okay. I grabbed the first one there. Christine Nguyen. Hey, congratulations. This is the most valuable prize you can get here at Boise State, by the way. So congratulations. All right. All right. My wife's smirking. By the way, I didn't introduce, my wife's over here supporting me with this. And the other one, and I apologize if I'm terrible at pronunciation.
Oh, Hunyi,
Hunyi?
right? Or Hunji.
Hunji. All right. Very good. Nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
All right. Well, hopefully you guys got something out of the time. And if you ever have other questions, ping me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to help. Okay. All right.